If you still believe Jesus came to create Christianity, then they succeeded. If you think the Gospels begin and end with the Bible, then they succeeded twice. The truth is, Jesus taught a hidden way, one that was buried, outlawed, and burned by empire. He never said, "Worship me." He said, "Become as I am." In the Gnostic Gospels, the outlawed texts reveal exactly what he meant. You were never meant to find this video. But if you did, it means something in you is finally ready. Because once you hear these 10 hidden teachings, you will never see Jesus the same way again. And you may never see yourself the same either. If everything you were taught about Jesus was inverted, would you dare to look again? What if the Jesus of religion was not the Jesus of truth? What if the church crowned him king to hide the fact that he came to awaken kings? We were told he came to save us. But what if he came to remind us? To tell you that you are not fallen. You are not broken. You have simply forgotten the light you were formed from, the kingdom you carry, the fire that once burned in your soul. This was the real gospel, the one buried beneath gold, guilt, and fear. Not a gospel of sin and shame, but a gospel of divine remembrance. When Jesus said, "I and the Father are one," he was not claiming cosmic rank. He was offering you a mirror. The things I do, you will do also, and greater. Ask yourself, when was the last time a church reminded you of that? They couldn't. Because if you remembered who you truly are, you would stop kneeling. You would begin to rise. This is the first forbidden teaching. Jesus did not come to be worshipped. He came to awaken what religion tried to sedate. He did not seek followers who bowed. He sought mirrors that remembered. Because here is the sacred paradox. He was not just pointing toward God. He was revealing what God looks like inside a human being. And if you've ever wondered why his message was considered dangerous, it's because it destroyed the middleman. No priests, no rituals, no gates standing between you and the divine. Only this: go inward, quiet the mind. Remember, but authority always fears the awakened. So Rome seized the key and built a lock. They took the map and sold a maze. They took truth and turned it into a throne. They told you God was distant, angry, watching. But Jesus said something revolutionary. The kingdom of God is within you. Do you hear? He didn't come to establish a religion. He came to dissolve the illusion of separation. So if he came not for worship but for remembrance, then who are you really? And if the same divine breath that moved through him is still breathing through you, why do you feel so far from it? Could it be that the truth was not buried in a tomb, but hidden inside you? This is only the beginning. Because in chapter 2 we move deeper into the teaching they feared most. That heaven was never a destination. It was a frequency, a state of consciousness, a living code. And once you learn how to access it from within, you'll realize you were never locked out. You were the gate the entire time. Let's open it. They told you heaven comes after death. But what if the greatest deception was convincing you heaven is elsewhere? What if you don't go to heaven? What if you become it? Jesus never said the kingdom of heaven appears when you die. He said the kingdom of heaven is within you. This was not symbolism. It was instruction. It was the architecture of reality. Heaven is not later. It is not a distant cloud realm, but a dimension woven into your breath. Heaven is alignment, a memory of origin, a frequency of divine union, pulsing inside the soul. And the doorway was never above the sky. It rests beneath your rib. It moves through your spine with your breath, in your silence, in the still gap between thoughts. This is the work, to tune the instrument of the self until it resonates with the home frequency you never truly left. And this terrified empire, because if heaven was revelation instead of reward, if you realized you could enter it any time without permission, priest, or payment, you would never again submit to borrowed authority. You would stop begging for paradise and begin radiating it. Heaven was never the prize. It was the power, a field of luminous intelligence, a vibration your soul already recognizes, a kingdom whose gate opens the moment you remember who you are. But the story was rewritten. Heaven was placed far away, something to earn. You were told you were too stained, too unworthy, too human to hold. So cathedrals were built outward to make you forget the cathedral within. This is the second forbidden teaching. Heaven is not a place you go. Heaven is what awakens when the search ends. It is not a reward for obedience. It is a mirror for the awakened. It begins when the war inside you stops. When you release the lie that you are separate from God. This is why Jesus spoke in parables. Because heaven cannot be explained. It can only be experienced. It is the pearl of great price, the treasure hidden in the field, the feast prepared but ignored by the world. Let me ask you something. Have you ever touched it? In stillness, in beauty, in tears that made no logical sense? Didn't something in you know you had never left? That the garden was still there? That all this time you were knocking on your own door? Heaven is not later. It is now. It is here. It is what you return to when the noise falls away. Let them sell the sky. You came to bring heaven here. But if heaven already lives within you, what keeps you locked out? If you still carry guilt from a story written before you were born, then they succeeded. Because the oldest lie ever told was that you are broken. What if sin was never a stain, but a forgetting? What if the soul was never condemned, only submerged in amnesia? Jesus didn't come to repair you. He came to remind you, you were not born fallen. You were born radiant, then taught to look away from your own light. You were taught to kneel before altars, but never to ignite the one inside your chest. Here is what will never be said from a pulpit. Sin is not your essence. It is the bruise left by forgetting your origin. They told you the fall began with Eve. But what if it was not a fall? What if it was the first awakening? What if the serpent was not evil, but symbolic of awareness? What if Eve did not commit the first sin, but opened the first eye? Because the fruit was not cursed, it was consciousness. And consciousness has always threatened control. Pause. Close your eyes. Not to repent but to remember. Do you feel it? That flicker beneath your ribs is not shame. It is return. What if the shadows you feared were simply light you never turned toward? What if you were never here to be saved, but to remember why you came? Somewhere inside you are echoes, memories without words, longings that don't belong to this lifetime. And the moment you ask why, remembrance begins. But if you have lived before, where have you been? And why did you return now? Here is a truth removed with surgical precision. Jesus knew you had lived before. He spoke of Elijah returning. He asked, "Who do you say I am?" Not because he needed the answer, but because you once knew it. The early Gnostics understood. The desert mystics whispered it. The soul does not come to earth once. It cycles. It learns. It remembers. Religion turned the gospel into a single life fear cage. But Jesus was a mystic of the soul's long journey. He taught life as a school, and the body as a garment you change. Why hide this? Because a soul that knows it has lived before, and will live again, cannot be ruled by fear of one death. And a soul without fear cannot be controlled. Reincarnation was not heresy to early Christians. It was assumed. The journey does not start at birth, nor end at death. It continues until the inner light is fully remembered. You are not one lifetime old. You are a library wearing skin, and your presence here is intentional. You are remembering, because the time has arrived. You did not click this by accident. You came carrying timelines in something unfinished. If your soul chose this moment, what did you come to reclaim? And if Mary remembered too, why was her gospel erased? Let's dismantle another pillar. If Peter was the rock of the church, Mary was the living water of truth. She was not a prostitute. She was initiated, the one who understood Jesus not externally, but internally, and that terrified authority, because her gospel did not teach obedience. It taught gnosis, inner knowing, direct revelation, no intermediaries. She called him the one who lives. He called her the one who knows. She carried the lost thread, the serpent wisdom, the womb of first memory. But power could not allow the sacred feminine to speak with equal fire. So they buried her beneath distortion, but not deeply enough. Her voice is rising again, not from pulpits, but from within you. If you feel drawn to wisdom beyond religion, wisdom that demands no belief but invites remembrance, it may be her echo awakening in your bones. This is more than content. It is a threshold. If you crossed it like this video to light the path for others still wandering, comment "She is rising," not for us, but to activate the field. Subscribe not for information, but as a vow that you will not forget again. You are not merely curious, you are called, and we are not finished, because what comes next changes everything. But if Mary remembered who she truly was, why do you still feel so distant from it? Perhaps because something ancient has been concealing it from you. And it isn't a devil, it is something far more subtle, and far more dangerous. What if the earth was never the center, but the reflection? Plato understood this, the mystics understood it, Jesus lived it. "This world is not my kingdom," he said, not because he rejected it, but because he remembered beyond it. "This body is a garment. This world is a stage, but you are not of this world. You entered it like light entering a mirror, and everything you see is a shadow of something higher, purer, truer. That ache you've always carried is not depression. It is homesickness. You have always sensed this world didn't quite fit. That isn't failure. It is memory leaking through. And the more you remember, the more you rise. Because the truth is, this realm was never meant to complete you. It was designed to awaken you. The pain, the beauty, the loss, each one a breadcrumb, each one a whisper. You came from light, and you will return as fire. But only when you stop mistaking the mirror for the source. Because you were never sent here to belong. You were sent here to remember. They gave you a cartoon enemy, red skin, horns, a pitchfork. But what if the real enemy was never a creature at all? What if the true darkness was amnesia, not possession, but disconnection? Because once you forget where you came from, you'll believe anything about where you're going. They never needed to imprison your body. They only needed to imprison your body. They only needed to cloud your memory. You don't need an exorcism. You need remembrance. Because the real fall of humanity was not disobedience. It was forgetting. Forgetting that you were light encoded with stars, breathed into existence by the infinite. Every distraction, every lie, every addiction, every division was engineered to keep you asleep. They built temples of stone, but Jesus pointed to the temple of flesh. They said, "Confess here." He said, "The kingdom is within you." You were taught to look upward, when the true doorway was inside your ribs. Gnosis means direct knowing. It is the difference between reading the word water and feeling the first drops of rain on your skin. Not belief, not doctrine, raw, undeniable experience. Three things were taken from you: direct knowing, inner fire, and sovereign light. But now, each one returns. You don't need a sermon, you need remembrance. And the ladder to heaven is not made of rungs. It is made of revelation. Each memory reclaimed brings you closer. So ask yourself, not do I believe, but do I remember? There is a reason this path was hidden. Because real truth is not merely inconvenient, it is dangerous to the lie. Jesus was not crucified for kindness. He was crucified for awakening people. And when you awaken, you will be misunderstood, mocked, even rejected. But hear this, that pain is proof. That friction is fire. That resistance means you are rising. You are not here to be liked. You are here to light the way. And when they try to dim you, shine brighter, because the Christ within you does not bow, it rises. This is the teaching they feared most, the one they buried beneath doctrine, fear, and fire. Not because it was blasphemy, but because it was too powerful. You were told God was above you, outside you, separate from you, watching from a throne. But the mystics knew, the Gnostics remembered, and Jesus whispered it with every breath. God is not a being, God is being itself. The breath in your lungs, the fire in your spine, the stillness behind your eyes. That is not just you, that is Source awakening in form. You are not merely made in the image of God. You are the expression, the echo, the current, the flame, the I am clothed in skin. The lie was separation, the truth is union. And when you stop searching for the divine in temples and heavens, you begin to feel it pulsing behind your ribs. You are never meant to worship God. You are meant to embody God, not in arrogance, but in reverence, not to rule the world but to heal it. Because when you awaken the divine within, you begin to recognize it in everyone else. And that is the beginning of heaven on earth. So let me ask you, if Jesus became the Christ, and the Christ lives in you, what are you waiting for? You are no longer a seeker. You are a returner. You are not outside the kingdom. You are what restores it. This is not the end. This is your rising. These were never just teachings. They were fragments of a map, hidden inside you. The kingdom was never in the sky. It was buried in your breath. You were never a sinner, only a star dimmed by forgetting. You don't need a book to find the light. You are the light. You have walked this path before. You felt the call, heard the whisper, died in silence, and now rise again in remembrance. Mary Magdalene knew, Jesus knew. The real battle was never against evil. It was against amnesia. This world is only the shadow of your origin. You are a messenger of the real. The Christ is not an idol. It is a memory code awakening within your DNA, not through belief, but through knowing, not through obedience, but through flame. And yes, this path will cost you, but only what was never truly you. You are not waiting for revelation.
You are the revelation. You are not outside the kingdom. You are what brings it back to the earth. This is your turning. This is your rise. And now you remember. The question is no longer who was he. The question is who are you becoming? And when you remember, something subtle but irreversible begins to happen. The world does not suddenly change its shape. The streets remain the same. The faces around you look familiar, but you are no longer the same one moving through it. You walk differently. You listen differently. You breathe with awareness instead of urgency. The noise no longer owns. The silence begins to speak. Because remembrance is not an idea. It is a shift in gravity. The moment memory returns, the center of your life moves inward. You stop orbiting the expectations of others. You stop bending toward fear. You stop borrowing meaning from systems that were never designed to know you. Something ancient straightens your spine from the inside. Something quiet takes the throne. This is why awakening feels lonely at first. Not because you are abandoned, but because you are no longer hypnotized by the crowd. The same conversations sound hollow. The same ambitions feel thin. The same rewards no longer satisfy. And for a while, you may wonder if something is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong. You are simply no longer asleep. The world was built to function on unconscious agreement, on repetition, without reflection, on belief without knowing, on movement without direction. When you awaken, you interrupt that flow. You become unpredictable to the system, and anything unpredictable is labeled dangerous. This is why truth was never shouted from palaces. It was whispered on mountains, spoken in parables, hidden in breath, encoded in stories that only the remembering could unlock. Jesus never tried to convince the masses. He spoke to those who had ears to hear, not because others were excluded, but because only some were ready. Awakening is not elitism, it is timing. You cannot wake someone who is not yet willing to remember, and you cannot unsee what has already revealed itself to you. Once the veil thins, it never fully returns. You begin to notice how much of the world is built on borrowed identity. People introduce themselves by titles, roles, achievements. They tell you who they are by what they do, what they own, what they survived, rarely by what they are. But you start to sense the difference. You feel the current beneath the costume, the presence behind the personality, the light behind the language, and sometimes, just for a moment, you recognize yourself in their eyes, before they look away, because remembrance is contagious, but frightening. To remember is to take responsibility. If you are light, you cannot keep blaming the dark. If you are a bridge, you cannot pretend you are broken. If the kingdom lives within you, you cannot wait for permission to embody it. This is why so many prefer belief over knowing. Belief postpones action. Knowing demands alignment. Belief says one day. Knowing says now. And knowing is costly. It costs you illusions. It costs you false belonging. It costs you the comfort of pretending you are small. But what it gives you is something no system can replace. Coherence. When your inner world aligns, your outer world reorganizes around it. Not magically, not instantly, but inevitably. Life begins to respond to you differently, not because you are controlling it, but because you are controlling it, but because you are no longer divided. Division was the real wound, not between people, not between nations, but within the self. You were taught to split yourself to survive, to silence intuition, to distrust inner knowing, to obey external authority over internal truth, to trade wonder for certainty, to trade fire for safety. And it worked. For a while. It built civilizations, it built machines, it built order, but it also built emptiness. And now the emptiness is speaking louder than the structures ever could. This is why so many feel restless, without knowing why. Why success feels hollow. Why distraction no longer distracts. Why entertainment feels exhausting. Why noise no longer numbs. The soul is calling its fragments home, and you are one of the ones who heard it. Not because you are special, but because you are ready. Readiness is not moral. It is vibrational. You reached the edge of forgetting and felt the pull back. And once the remembering begins, life stops being about accumulation and becomes about integration. You stop asking, what should I become? And start asking, what must I release to be what I already am? This is where the teachings deepen, because awakening is not it is embodiment. You do not leave the world behind. You enter it fully. For the first time, you feel pain without drowning in it. You feel joy without clinging to it. You witness chaos without becoming it. You stand in fire without burning. This is what it means to walk as Christ conscious, not to be worshipped, but to be present, to stand so rooted in truth, that fear has nothing to attach to speak without forcing, to love without losing yourself, to act without violence, to remember without arrogance. And slowly, quietly, others begin to feel it. They may not understand you, they may resist you, they may project onto you, but something in them responds, because light does not argue, it reveals, and revelation always disrupts the lie. This is why the path continues inward, why silence becomes nourished, why solitude feels sacred instead of empty, why prayer turns into listening, why scripture turns into mirror, why breath becomes altar. You are no longer seeking God, you are learning to stay present with God as yourself, and this is only the beginning, because remembrance unfolds in layers. What returns first is identity, what returns next is purpose, what returns last is power, not power over others, but power over illusion. And once illusion loses its grip, fear collapses. And when fear collapses, love stops being an emotion and becomes a state you carry, a state you transmit, a state that heals without trying. And that is when the kingdom stops being a concept and starts becoming a presence through you. If something ancient stirred within you, do not let it fall asleep again. This video found you for a reason. Now let it find the others. Like this video, not for vanity, but as a signal fire, for the forgotten ones still wandering in the dark. Comment below, I remember. Let others see they are not alone. Subscribe, not to us, but to the living current awakening within your soul, because this is not a channel, it is a call to the inner church, the one never built with bricks, but with knowing, with light, with you. The path does not end here, it begins now, and when you are ready, the next revelation will find you. Until then, walk in light, and do not forget who you are. You are the revelation, you are the return, you remember.